Good morning, all, and welcome to the home of the New York City Bar Association. New York City Bar Association is 23,000 members strong, and we're very proud of this organization's commitment to support the access to justice, and most importantly, the fair application of the law to serve all of those of us who live under the rule of law. My name is Sam Seymour, and I'm the president of the New York City Bar Association. And I'm delighted to be here today with the president of the New York State Bar Association, Steve Younger, and all the other bar leaders you see here with us this morning. We are here to speak in support of the enactment of same-sex marriage legislation and to urge the legislature to act now to make it happen in New York. We can no longer treat gay and lesbian couples and their children as second-class citizens, and we are pleased to explain the reasoning behind our position. Steve Younger is going to take the podium in a moment and talk about some of our substantive positions and the reasoning behind them. I'm going to come back in a little bit and talk about some examples, a few of which are drawn from real life, about the legal issues that are presented by this topic. And at the conclusion of that, we'd be happy to take questions. So I'm happy to turn it over to my great friend and a great leader of the bar, Steve Younger. Steve?
Thank you so much, Sam, and thanks to the City Bar for hosting us this morning. On behalf of the New York State Bar Association, which is the largest voluntary state bar association in the world, it's my privilege to be here today with leaders of over 20 bar associations from across our state, which represent a diverse spectrum of lawyers in New York. We are, as our motto at the State Bar, have the following credo. We stand for doing the public good, and that's what we're here to talk about today. We are very concerned at the New York State Bar that without the right to marry, tens of thousands of New York couples are being denied basic legal protections under New York law. With us today from the State Bar is our President-elect, Vince Doyle, members of our executive committee, as well as members of a wide range of bar associations. I'd like to read off a list of those who are joining us today. We have with us from the ABA, Mark Alcott, our state delegate, and Jim Silconet. We have with us from the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, Susan Bender. From the Asian American Bar of New York, Yang Chen. From the Bronx Bar, Christy Lorenzo. From the Hispanic National Bar, Robert Maldonado. From the LGBT Bar of Greater New York, Charlene Jettison. From the Metropolitan Black Bar, Nadine Fontaine. From the Muslim Bar, my good friend Adil Mangi, and also Asim Rahman. From the New York County Lawyers, we have Stuart Gerson and Marilyn Flood. From the New York State Bar, we also have Michelle Kahn, the head of our LGBT committee. From the New York State Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, Kevin O'Connell. From the Puerto Rican Bar, we have Rosalie Marquez Morales. From the Society of New York Workers' Compensation Bar, Catherine Stanton. From the South Asian Bar, Rahul Agarwal. We also have some other folks who joined us. Did I leave anybody off?
The Women's Bar of the State of New York.
The Women's Bar of the State of New York, is that Susan Moss?
Susan Moss.
I couldn't miss you, Susan. Not here today, but supporting us are the Albany County Bar, the Dominican Bar, the Monroe County Bar, the New York Criminal Bar Association, the Onondaga County Bar, and the Rockland County Bar. We thank all of them for their support. As Sam said, I'm going to talk to you for a moment about the lack of protections that same-sex couples have in New York law. Our State Bar Association, House of Delegates, has studied this issue for some time, and we believe quite strongly that there needs to be a law enacted in New York State to finally bring about the right to marry for same-sex couples. When you boil it down, marriage is a contract. It's a legal relationship. Without being able to marry, same-sex couples in our state face discrimination in a wide range of areas that most New Yorkers take for granted. These include health care, housing, child raising, inheritance, wrongful death, and property rights should a couple split up. While there have been some laws in New York enacted in this field, couples face a crazy quote work approach to this area, something that affects their daily life which denies them the legal protections that other couples enjoy in New York. Now, we believe at the State Bar, and we're glad to have so many join us, that the right to marry is one of the fundamental rights in our country that ought to be extended to all couples. We reached that conclusion after careful consideration, and we had a wonderful committee. I know Michelle Kahn is here, who was on that committee. Hunter Carter is here, I saw. And we are really grateful to be able to support this position. They identified over 1,300 laws and regulations in our state that discriminate against same-sex couples. We believe that passing legislation in this area ought to be a top priority, not just of lawyers, but of all New Yorkers. As a result, we strongly support legislation this year in this arena. This legislation will create the right to a civil legal marriage, and the law would be made clear that no member of the clergy would be required to perform a marriage in this area. I'd like to share a couple of examples with you of the kind of discrimination that same-sex couples experience in our state as a result of New York law. They may be unable to get employer-sponsored health insurance that would cover their whole family. If their relationship breaks down, there's no right to equitable distribution or maintenance, such as other couples enjoy. Despite raising a child as a partnership and a family unit, there's no presumption that a child born to the partnership is a child of both parents. So as a result of that, these parents experience discrimination in many different fields, whether it's in the child's school, whether it's in a hospital and emergency room, or other settings where authorities may question their status. As lawyers, we are concerned about the lack of protection given to same-sex couples under New York law. So, in our view, without the right to marry, same-sex couples in our state find it difficult, if not impossible, to navigate the many legal issues that affect all of our daily lives. So today, we urge the New York State Legislature to bring to a vote and to pass legislation that will legalize same-sex marriage in New York. This system of separate but unequal treatment under New York law can no longer be tolerated. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to turn it back to Sam.
Thank you, Steve. I want to give a couple more examples, some of which are drawn from real-life cases about the hardships that come from the current state of the law. Forgive us, we're lawyers. These are technical legal issues, but that's really the point of our presentation today, to talk about the way some of these legal issues affect some, but not all of our citizens. Let me give you the first example. A same-sex couple's child is injured in school and is rushed to the emergency room. The non-biological parent appears at the hospital and inquires about the child. The emergency room personnel ask about the relationship and are not satisfied that this loving parent has the right to any information about the child's condition. If the couple were married, this problem would not arise. Instead, the partner may not be permitted to direct the child's care and may not even be permitted to visit the child. We turn to another example, and this one is drawn from an actual case. Deborah H. and Janice R. entered into a Vermont civil union in 2003. A child came into the family after the marriage by assisted reproductive technology, with Janice as the biological mother. The couple separated then in 2006, and although Janice initially granted Deborah limited visitation rights, she eventually withheld visitation and later all communications with their child. Deborah initiated litigation in 2008, seeking to pay child support and have visitation with the child. It was finally resolved 2 years later when the Court of Appeals ruled, based on common law principles of comity, that is the legal term for recognizing the law of another sovereign, that New York must recognize Deborah's parentage created by the civil union in Vermont, and so she could seek visitation and custody at a hearing to determine the best interests of the child. Now, had Deborah and Janice been married and then divorced, both parents would have had the duty to support the child, and both parents would have had the right to seek custody and visitation rights, and these issues would have been worked out through recognized proceedings of divorce. In another example, a Canadian man who married another man in Canada was faced with probating a will in New York after his spouse died. What would be a routine process for an opposite-sex married couple became a several-year court struggle when the deceased spouse's brother claimed the spouse was not entitled to probate the will in New York as the marriage was not valid. Fortunately, the Surrogates Court and later the Appellate Division First Department ruled that the Canadian marriage should be recognized under New York law, but not until the estate was significantly diminished by legal fees in the process. And just one county over, in a very similar situation where two men had been married in Canada and one spouse died, the court reached a different conclusion. In that case, the court held that the decedent's will could not be probated unless the decedent's parents were noticed in the proceeding. And let me give you one final example. A same-sex couple had a committed relationship and one partner died. The deceased partner never changed his will after the start of the relationship, and the original will left funds to charity. The surviving partner had been economically dependent on the deceased partner. If they had been married, he would be able to claim a spousal exemption for 1/3 of the estate. But without marriage, he got nothing. If the partner had died without a will, even if there was an expressed intention to leave his estate to the partner, the estate would have passed to blood relatives. If they wanted to convey estate assets to the surviving partner, there would be a gift tax if the estate was of any significant size. Now, I want to turn to the topic of civil unions for just a moment before taking questions. Civil unions, it is our position, are not an acceptable substitute for marriage. Instead of making a straightforward change to permit marriage regardless of the sex of those involved, civil unions create a totally new class of relationships. This does not provide the widely recognized legal status that marriage does. The rights of civil union couples will not be understood by all of the many individuals and institutions, including schools and hospitals, that families must come in contact with. There is no clarity whatsoever as to how other states would recognize New York civil unions. It is not at all clear that a civil union statute would cover all aspects of the law to which the concept of marriage relates. In addition, adopting civil unions would be a step backwards, since same-sex marriages in other states are recognized in New York. They will only further confuse and not clarify the law in our state. And should the Federal Defense of Marriage Act be repealed or overturned, couples who enter into civil unions would be denied all federal rights and benefits that married couples would get. In our region, New Jersey has civil unions, and Vermont and Connecticut have had civil unions until they converted to marriage equality. Courts and commissions in those states have found civil unions are poorly understood, erratically recognized, and widely viewed as a second-class status. The New Jersey Commission, which studied this, also found that civil unions have a disparate impact on those with less financial resources to retain lawyers necessary to assert their rights in those systems. Civil unions impose second-class status on a whole category of people, and the people of the state of New York deserve better than that. Same-sex couples who are willing to accept the responsibilities of marriage should enjoy the equal and very clear benefits of marriage under the law of the state of New York. We hope our position has been clear, and Steve and I and the rest of us up here will be happy to take any questions. Thank you all for joining us. Yes?
You talked at length about what the benefits would be for marriage to the partners involved. Are there any additional benefits to the state by legalizing it?
There's an economic benefit. There's a whole group out there promote New York tourism that says, you know, it'll promote New York. But that's really not the issue that we stand for. We stand up here as lawyers, and I think the main benefit is to finally end a form of discrimination. We are a country, as Sam said, that's run by the rule of law. And under the rule of law, all Americans, whether you're in a same-sex relationship, a conventional relationship, or no relationship at all, should be able to say our law is a fair law, and right now it's not.
Is there any concern that same-sex couples from New York might move to Connecticut or Massachusetts? Is there any concern about that?
Well, other couples have moved to other states to get married and then have returned to New York. Those are some of the situations we talked about as examples where the lack of a marriage law in the state makes their situation unclear. Great gains have been made through executive orders, through interpretation in the courts, and we take nothing away from that. But at the end of the day, there is a difference between the civil unions of our state, in the state, or an out-of-state marriage recognized here, and actual marriage under New York law. That's what I
Yeah, and to be clear, you can be married in New York. You just can't get married in New York. And that's what we want to change.
Why now you decided to give this support and not before?
Our position has been out there for a long time. We decided to call this together today because we think the time is right in Albany for consideration of this in the legislature and in the halls of power. So we decided to reach out to others who share our view, to talk to the press about our view, but it's a long-standing position. Just, we think the time is right. We think there's a chance. We can't predict the outcome in Albany. We would like to see it happen, and we're here to do what we can to make it happen. Anything else? All right.
What's the use of a law that's not recognized by federal government though? It's only going to be state.
Well, there are a host of legal implications of state law. There are some under federal law which will change if DOMA is abolished, and we have long stood for the abolition of DOMA. But you know, Sam listed them. You know, inheritance is determined by state law. The ability to pass down a lease of an apartment is determined by state law. Your rights to certain benefits are determined by state law. State taxes are determined by state law. We identified 1,300 examples like that. And so we believe that New York ought to do this as well. Many states like New York will then recognize these marriages in other states. That's what we call comity, as Sam mentioned. So there are many, many rights under New York state law that are just unfair now and ought to be changed.
Federal law is supreme, but it's very limited. The law of the people is the law of the states. And New York is the law that needs to change.
Are you specifically endorsing the bill that's currently in Albany for same-sex marriage, or just the idea generally of same-sex marriage legislation?
We're in support of the bill that's been introduced. Yes. All right. With no further questions, I want to thank you all for joining us here in the House of the Association. As you go out, enjoy our beautiful building. So I can't speak for the weather outside, but thank you all again for coming.
And I want to thank Sam and the entire City Bar and all the many bars who joined with us this morning. Thank you so, so much.